All right, fantastic. So we'll get started. Thank you very, very much for being here. I'm really excited to chat with you and show you around what we've been working on and see how we can support you or other teachers that you work with or other administrators that you work with as well. So my name is Brendan Finch. I'm a veteran science teacher, and I started Inner Orbit for my classroom. We also have a leveled reading program that we've started, and I'm happy to share that with you if you're interested. But right now, what we're here to talk about is 3D assessment and professional development. We're going to talk about our coaching that we offer, and then also the platform that we just released recently called Inner Orbit. Super excited to share all of these with you. So to get started, also at the very bottom of the YouTube video, there's a description. In the description, there's a link to Google Slides, and it's goo.gl/slides. It's 8VMZ38. That's actually a tool that you can use to ask questions. What I'll do is as I go through the webinar, I'll stop between each section and go ahead and answer questions that you have. That just helps you to submit questions so that I see them. And then also other people can upvote questions if there's a question that you like and you want to learn more about that topic. All right, let's get started. So today we're going to chat about phenomenon clusters. We're going to talk a little bit about 3D assessment writing process, so what we use in-house at Inner Orbit. We're going to go over Inner Orbit, so our three-dimensional assessment platform, just to show you what that looks like. And then we're going to talk about the assessment PD options that we offer through Inner Orbit. So to start out with, we're just going to kick off with a general overview of writing questions and three-dimensional questions. So let's talk about phenomena. So phenomena are observable events that occur naturally. Everything that's three-dimensional should focus around a phenomena with either a lesson or an assessment. And that means that students should be able to apply scientific knowledge to make sense of what's happening. So a good example is at the bottom of this slide, and it's just, draw a model of the water cycle to explain what is happening to this water droplet. The whole goal here is that no one is regurgitating information that they've learned prior. We really want students to focus on, applying everything they've already learned about the water cycle to explain what's happening to this water droplet. Sense making is kind of the next, and this is just our general overview of what three-dimensional assessment should look like. So we want students to make sense of a novel situation. So for your units, you have anchor phenomena that you're working on. For assessments, you also want to have novel phenomena that students are making sense of. This should apply knowledge to make sense. So whatever they've learned in class, in this case, we're going to be talking about magnetism and electricity. And in this phenomena down here, so we want to know, how can we use magnetic forces to explain the movement of the copper wire? In prior lessons, students should have definitely understood that current moves through wires when there's a difference in charge, and that current flowing creates an electromagnetic field around whatever it's flowing through. And then also magnets have a magnetic field around them. And so this is a small electromotor, and we want students to be able to apply, so either draw a diagram or explain in words what's going on here. This is just the basics of what we do. Good phenomena are the most important part of this. A good phenomena, students will need to answer questions. So an example of this is these mushrooms that are sort of time lapse down here and exploding out of this group of dead leaves. So we want it to be novel. So this is a very, very unique and very, very specific phenomena, something that's happening on a forest floor. And we want it to be relevant. So I live in a part of California where, right now, a lot of these forests are getting burned down, but there are forests and there are mushrooms. So ideally, it should even be culturally relevant or relevant, geographically, where students are walking to class and they would see these mushrooms growing. Super, super important. We want it to be interesting. So this is just kind of visually appealing. I think media plays a huge role in anything that is interesting. So if you have phenomena where it's beautiful, I think that's awesome. GIFs are an excellent way to do that, and it's kind of like what this generation of young adults consume the most of. So in our PDs, we'll actually teach you how to use GIFs in your assessments, and we'll use Giphy and look at YouTube and just look at how to create those things, because the tools are pretty simple, but it can be a little complex to to handle on your own. It's really, really important they can be explained by the application of science concepts. So if we're looking at a novel phenomena, it can't be something artificial. It's got to be something that can be explained through science. So don't make up data. Don't just come up with some random graph. Find something that is real and find something that can be explained by science concepts. This is where clusters come in. So ideally, your assessment shouldn't just include one question, but a group of questions that focus around a phenomena. And this is what we teach teachers to do, and this is what we do ourselves. Clusters can include between 1 and 10 questions. I think that if you go beyond 10, that you start to sort of lose interest, and there's not as much novelty to the phenomena anymore. Even just having 1 or 2 question clusters are great as well. What I think is super important as well is just to make sure that you don't have to use that cluster all in one sitting. So if you develop a cluster around, this is Antarctica expanding over, a few months in 2014, that we can use this and use a couple questions as a do now. We can use a couple questions as an exit slip. We can look at this phenomena over the course of several different formative assessments. It doesn't have to be over just one assessment. I think that's super important. We use evidence statements to piece together questions that ask students to apply what they've learned to make sense of phenomena. And I'll go over what that looks like in a second. So this could be a great earth science or even physical science. We could talk about what's happening to the atoms in the water as there are changes being made to to the size of Antarctica and the ice shelf around it. We could also talk about the water cycle, and in earth science, we could talk about anything where there's interaction between the different spheres. So the goal here really is that they're applying. So let's talk about our 3D process really quick. I'm going to go over a very, very brief overview of what we do. In our PD, we'll go through this in great depth and make sure that teachers find a performance expectation that's relevant to them, and we'll go over it. So what we always do at the very beginning of this, and this is a Google Doc, and I'm happy to walk you through this. This is probably best viewed at full screen. So if you have the ability to see this in full screen, please do so. What we do is we always look at the performance expectations. This is super important for a high level overview. We always write clusters for one performance expectation. So I believe that if a group of teachers get together, each one focuses on one PE, then it's really, really easy for you to share the clusters that you created and have really high quality assessments rather than bundling together 5 PEs for one assessment, which is really, really tough. So overall, we want to look at the performance expectation. We want to look at the science and engineering practices, the DCIs, and the cross-cutting concepts. The goal here is really just to get an overview of cause and effect, adaptation, and then the practice that we want to have students cover. I also really, really like to look at the progressions, especially of the DCIs. Understanding where students started in elementary school and this is a middle school, MS LS 4-6, and then where they need to go to middle school and then where they need to go to high school is really, really important. So students in elementary school understand that some organisms live better in some environments, some survive less well, and some cannot survive in an environment. In middle school, we learn that there's adaptations that are sort of managed through natural selection that respond, where organisms can actually respond to an environment over time and can change. If there are traits that allow them to live long enough to reproduce, then they survive for a long time, and it's awesome. And their traits are then spread through the population, and usually that changes the distribution. In high school, students get into really, really specific mechanisms by which natural selection, and then the word evolution is talked about here, work. And so we talk about extinctions, we talk about changes in the physical environment, and also that how that distribution of traits can change when conditions change. So that's really, really important. And then just as a really, really brief note, we'll look at the evidence statements. So for this, the evidence statements are always broken up into 3 or to 5 main parts. So this is representation, mathematical modeling, and analysis. Whenever we're building assessments, we always look at, and you'll notice that some of these are bolded and some are not. So I go through and I'll actually create assessments with the a very, very specific part of the evidence statements. Obviously, you can create a summative assessment that goes over the entire performance expectation on your own, and then just administer that one thing. But if you're looking to do formative assessment and you're looking to track progress over time, these evidence statements are these deconstructed standards that are really awesome for this. And you can write a question that talks about characteristics of a species that change over time through adaptation by natural selection in response to changing environmental conditions. So you can write a question that literally addresses that one tiny element of the evidence statement. And then you can look at that and have data on this one very, very specific piece. And it's very actionable as well. So we write questions for very specific parts of the evidence statements. And then on our questions, they're structured loosely with a phenomena. So there'll be an image here. So this is, I mean, we're in California, so we were actually evacuated for the fires. It's been a little bit hectic over here, but things are calming down now, at least in my area. And we'll give them a GIF that's kind of interesting. We'll give them a description of what this GIF, is talking about. In this case, we need to have some mathematical modeling. There needs to be data. So we have trees that survived or were living before there was a fire and trees after a fire. And then we always like to cite the actual research studies the data came from. I think this is just super important to ground whatever you're doing. And you also just tell students, this is real data and this is a real problem. So I highly recommend this. After that, we write questions and we'll actually comment on the Google Docs exactly the piece of an evidence statement that we're addressing via that question. This is really helpful because as other coaches or as we are going through and are coaching teachers, we can say, all right, this is essentially your claim for the assessment. And we can say, this is great, but you actually also are covering some analysis topics. So make sure you're thinking about those as well. And maybe we can tag those in the standards. This also helps us as we go through and tag assessments with very specific pieces of standards. It helps us to go through and then tag them more accurately and see exactly what the teacher intended or the coach intended with that question. So we always use these clusters to create. So there's multiple choice questions, there's some graphing questions, modeling questions, and then also analyzing other students' claims. These are all awesome, and they're all tagged with part 1 or part 2 or part 3, either the modeling, the analysis, or the representation elements of those of this standard. Awesome. So we also have some resources. I'll share these with you via email after the webinar, but it's just a really, really simple Google Drive folder that has some of our favorite tools for writing assessments. I hope that this is helpful. So you can check that out, and I will follow up with that later. So let's look at our actual platform. What we want to do, and probably the most important feedback that we've heard from teachers, is that they'll go to a PD and they'll leave a PD on NGSS or 3D assessment, and they'll just have one question that they went through, and or one cluster, or they'll have whatever is in the OER bank somewhere to use, and they kind of don't have the tools they need to write all these questions. And what we want to do is we want to give teachers a platform for 3-dimensional questions and a bank of thousands of items that they can choose from, so they can write their own with local phenomena, and then they can use ours to supplement that, so that they're not writing a new 3-dimensional assessment every day, which is very hard. So right now I'm on innerorbit.com. I'm going to scroll down to our assessments just to give you an idea of what all of this looks like. So everything is based around either GIFs or as pretty of pictures as we can get, except for this California condor one. We had to zoom out a little bit. California condors are pretty gnarly looking birds, so we purposefully don't include any really, really close-ups of them, but there's also some pretty cool pictures of them in here. So you can click through these, and the goal is really, with each of these phenomena, we have these clusters of questions. So this is an aerosols phenomena with this really cool NASA GIF of particles and particulate matter, dust, sea salt, smoke, and sulfate that are flowing through the atmosphere. We tag questions to really specific parts of the standards. So you can look at systems models. You can look at the DCIs. So this is a 2-dimensional question, or a 1-dimensional question that just looks at DCIs for MS ES 2-6. This one is a modeling question, asking students to draw on a map, where the most ice is, so they can circle and draw, and then you as a teacher can review that later. And some questions are just looking at one particular DCI, so we have drag and drop questions as well. Obviously, this is all built around the standardized assessments that that students are taking at the end of the year as a part of state tests. We also have free response questions and some really cool tools to help teachers grade these much more quickly. One of the most important parts about three-dimensional assessment is that you need to see student thinking. So as students are going through and answering questions, we want to look at their thinking, but we have some tools that makes it just really easy to see what's going on and analyze that and all that. Again, if you have questions for me as I go through this, in the description for the video, there's a link to the Google Slides. It's so if you scroll down the page a little bit, you'll see goo.gl/slides/8vmz38. So you can click on that and then submit questions, and I'll go through and answer the questions as they come through. Cool. So I'm going to log into an account really quick to show you around how to build assessments with our platform. And so again, as teachers go through our PD, they get access to the platform in addition to whatever items they wrote in the PD, which is pretty important. So to build an assessment, you can search for a topic. So let's just look for erosion, and we'll have a bunch of clusters that come in there. You can also search for an actual standard or an SEP, so MSPS 1-3, or developing and using models, or developing possible solutions, or growth and development of organisms. And you can search for clusters that are aligned to that. All of the clusters, again, we're inside Inner Orbit right now in a demo account. All of these clusters look at, so there's a phenomena. So these are just different spheres interacting with each other on a beach. And teachers can sort through questions that are aligned to this. So we search for developing using models, that's highlighted, but you can also see the other standards that are tagged with this. They're not just tagged with stability and change, tagged with a very specific element of like this cross-cutting concept or this DCI, and I'll show you in the reports exactly what that looks like. The goal here is that you can add these to a quiz. So let's say we want to create a do now for the interactions between different spheres, and we'll just make it 2 questions to make it short. You can save and assign this to your classes. Title it spheres do now, and then send it out to periods 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have student ad links that they can use to sign up into your rosters. So super simple. We can also sync with Clever, and we offer Google single sign-on, so it's really easy. So as you go through and build more assessments, not just with your in your own classroom, but through your school or even your district, you can actually pull different assessments that teachers have created in different classrooms into your classroom and assign those. So if you are building common assessments and you want to share it with other teachers, you can build those through Inner Orbit and then share them. And everything is obviously these just really beautiful phenomena and really rich media, and then high quality questions. That's the goal. Probably the most beautiful thing, aside from our the question bank of assessment items, are the reports. So in every other platform that I've ever seen, in a report you'll see a score on MSPS 1-3. So this is a middle school performance expectation. Knowing that 50% of my students are proficient in this MSPS 1-3 is super nebulous. And if I'm sitting down for a PLC meeting, it's not helpful for me to just know that there are that half my students struggle with this. I know nothing at that point. So what we do is we break this down by DCIs, by SEPs, by cross-cutting concepts, and then by the evidence statements themselves. So the goal is that you can go through and look at the DCIs that students struggle with. And in this, for MSPS 1-3, it's PS1A and PS1B. We can look at parts they did okay with, parts they did great on, and then all parts of the standard. So we actually tag these questions to really specific elements of each grade level band. So this is PS1A. Here are the elements for 3 through 5, and here are the elements for 6 through 8. So I can sit down with a PLC meeting or with other teachers in my department or my grade level, and I can say, all right, students know that substances are made from different types of atoms, which combine in various ways, but students really struggled with the idea that each pure substance has characteristic physical and chemical properties. That right there is perfect for an objective-driven lesson where we want to really get in and dig into that really specific piece of data. The goal is also over time, so there are zeros. A lot of these don't have any color, so these weren't assessed yet in this account. If you're assigning more and more questions over time, what you'll see is more and more of these filling in, and you'll get scores. And we can look at progress for students on an SEP, over a unit, over a school year, or even between multiple school years. And we'll also see all the different aspects of that SEP. So if we're looking at obtaining, evaluating, communicating information, definitely want to make sure that we're not just covering one piece of that, but all of the parts of that. So our questions will be tagged with really specific elements of those SEPs, or of the cross-cutting concepts, or even of the evidence statements. So we can sit as a department, or I can sit in my classroom and say, all right, my students really struggle with knowing that synthetic materials come from natural resources via chemical reactions, and then I can write a lesson or a chunk for a lesson to go over that. There's some questions in the chat box that I'm going to address really quick. So I'm just going to go in here and show that to you. All right, cool. So Keith asks, he said, in New York, we're just beginning the assessment process. This is not a silly question, Keith. No worries. So everything is, yes, so everything right now is built around our platform. Obviously, as we do a PD, teachers are able to ask questions and just administer them on a PDF. If you have digital platforms, like if there's Chromebooks, or if you're using iPads or whatever, our platform is compatible with all of those things. We're mobile friendly, so even if kids are BYOD, bringing cell phones in, they can use that to take these tests. And you can also use that to even, assign them and create them yourself. So the goal really is to make it super easy. Keith, thank you so much for the question. I really, really appreciate it. If you all have any other questions, please feel free to type those in via that Google Slides link that's in the description for the YouTube video. But again, the whole goal here is just, instead of telling you that students struggle with MSPS 1-3, which is kind of meaningless, we tell you the really specific elements of an evidence statement or of a DCI that students got or that students struggle with. So you can make real instructional decisions either from a district level PD standpoint, or from a school level standpoint for PD, or just in your own classroom and say, we need to talk about this really specific element. So that's the goal here. We also have really cool tools for grading that make things go much faster, and I'm happy to walk y'all through that. In the description for the video, there's actually a link for Calendly, and you're able to go in there and you can schedule a meeting with us if you would like to learn more. I'm super happy to show you around the site and even set up a quick pilot for your teachers if that's interesting, or just do a demo for you if you're interested in that. So let's talk about our in-person 3D PD really quick. So our in-person PD is pretty simple. So all we're looking to do is give you a 1 to 2 hour intensive session focused on learning our framework and writing phenomena-driven assessments. So we'll sit with teachers in person. You have to sit down. You have to write an assessment during this period. So that's the goal. And then we'll do follow-up coaching as well. Whenever I did professional development as a teacher, probably the hardest part was that there's you go in and you're super excited about this thing and you learn how to do the thing, and then afterwards you're like, now what do I do? So we will actually follow up and give 2 rounds of feedback. So teachers drop their assessments into a folder. We'll go in, give them feedback, write comments, iterative comments. So the goal is to improve over time. And then we'll actually take those questions that they write, instead of them having to do any of this work, we'll upload them and tag them with really specific standards. So everything that I was showing you in the reports, we'll tag them just like this into our platform, and then teachers can administer those assessments. Also, anyone who goes through a PD gets access to Inner Orbit for the rest of the school year. So not only do you get to get coaching on creating assessments and create assessments, but then you get access to a question bank, and all of the questions you've created are uploaded in there. So it's meant to be just absolutely flawless in your ability to use and iterate upon the strategies that you learned in your PD. And then now you can go through and analyze more data. And what we found is, as teachers see good examples of questions, it's really, really easy for them to create more questions. So if you've gone through the PD, if you've had some of the input or some of the follow-up coaching, and then you've used the site, you're seeing these questions over and over again, and you're able to do a lot with that. We also offer virtual coaching. So this is the 3D PD virtual coaching. And that involves, so a virtual PD. So it's pretty much the same as the in-person PD. It's just done at the leisure of your department, and we don't have to fly out there. This is something where we give you some tools to scaffold assessment writing. It's a little bit harder for us to go through and give personal feedback during that virtual session. So what we do is we do follow-up coaching. We'll do 2 rounds of feedback and comments to improve assessments before we upload and tag them with detailed standards. So everything in the reports, once teachers write assessments, we will go ahead and upload them in there. I'm sure some of you may have done this before or have people at the district level that do this, where their whole job is uploading questions into an assessment platform, which is not fun. So for right now, whenever you go through the PD, we will do that for you. We're super happy to do so. And then afterwards, we'll also do 1 hour of video chat for each teacher to provide personal and live feedback. So as we go through these rounds of feedback and comments on those Google Docs, that will sit down with the teacher, and this can be in one sitting of a whole hour, which I wouldn't recommend, but instead it can be maybe 2 15-minute slices during planning time, and then a half an hour slice, after school or before school or whatever it is. And the goal is really that you can brainstorm with us. We can also just walk through what we feel went really, really, really well and what recommendations we have. And then we can also plan future assessments in addition to that. You also get inter-orbit access. So anyone that goes through the PD, either virtual PD or the in-person PD, gets access to our platform for the rest of the school year. They can create more assessments, they can administer assessments, and they can analyze the assessments with our ridiculously detailed reports. And that's the goal. Awesome. So we have a couple questions. I'm gonna pause for a second to get to these questions and answers. Thank you all for asking questions. Penelope writes, does this support text-to-speech for our students that need reading support? So we absolutely have a text-to-speech option, and that should work. So we use an app within our site, and that works to read the text-to-speech. So you should have absolutely no problem with that. If that's something that you're really curious about, Penelope, then I'll put my email up later, and we can chat more about this. And I'm super happy to support you with that. Thank you so much for the question. That's awesome. We also have an anonymous question. Mysterious. So hi, do the multiple choice questions only have one correct response, or can there be multiple correct responses? State of Kentucky uses some of these types of questions to assess NGSS. Awesome question. I think I know who you are from Kentucky, but I like that you went anonymous. So that right now, our multiple choice questions are all just single correct answers. However, for the drag and drop, and we also have even just fill in the blank questions where students have to type in an answer. Those are all, obviously there's multiple correct answers for all of those. We will in the future have the multiple correct responses. We just released the platform about a month ago, so it's brand new. But after a little while, probably in the next couple months, we'll be able to set up these multiple correct responses. So if you write questions like this and you send them to us, or we do a PD and you work on those, then we'd be happy to build that. Awesome. So Suzanne asks, what would be the cost to a school? So I would actually love to chat with you about this later on. It depends on the number of students that you have using the platform, the number of teachers, and I would highly recommend. So right now, InterOrbit is completely free. So if you want to try the database, and if you want to create some assessments today to use tomorrow in your classroom, you can go in right now to interorbit.com, and you'll just click sign up, and that'll walk you through signing up. And if you have a Google account, you can just click to sign up, and yeah, that's great. For the PD itself, what I'd love to do is actually set up a meeting and understand what you're looking for. And let me just go back to this. So I'm answering this question from Suzanne. So if you want us to do the live PD or the virtual PD, we need to know how many teachers are going to be there, and we're happy to talk about costs on a meeting outside of this. It totally depends on your school and what you're looking for and kind of what your goals are. So we want to be very focused on that. In the description for the YouTube video, if you scroll down on the page, you'll see a Calendly link. And if you want to make a meeting with me, then then please do that right now. You can find a time on my calendar and we can chat about this. And that's an awesome question. Cool. Penelope says, I teach SPED, biology, and all the platforms we use in Tennessee means that teacher has to read the online test. Yeah, so the goal is that you wouldn't have to do that. Let me put that up again. The goal is you wouldn't have to do that, read the test yourself, that you could actually use our read aloud function because that's silly. Thank you so much for the follow-up questions as well. So Keith says, do the questions developed locally become part of the global question bank automatically, or can they remain private? So we can absolutely have questions remain private. What we'll do is any questions that teachers want to share globally will be published with a Creative Commons license. So it's something that teachers can edit. And in the future, and the reason why this is important, and I mean, I think for just everyone is really, really helpful. So teachers will actually be able to go in and they'll find your questions, they'll be able to edit them and even change the language of the question and the phrasing of it to align with either if they have a classroom of ELLs, if they have a classroom of gifted students, if they didn't cover that one vocab word that you mentioned in your question that we mentioned, then teachers can go in and sort of fiddle with the phrasing of the questions. Yep. Awesome. And then one more question from Penelope. Thank you so much for asking all these questions. Awesome. So if we have the free program, can we upload our own questions in addition to what you have loaded? So right now, there is no way for teachers to do that. We'll upload them for you. But again, if you follow up with me, I would be happy to walk you through that. So and actually upload them for you. Right now, the main focus is really just having the most high quality questions that exist. And so it's really important to us to not have, questions on there that are just sort of like quiz questions that you'll find on other formative assessment platforms that aren't as rigorous and aren't really as focused on the evidence statements. So we'd want to look through your questions first, make sure that they're super awesome, and then upload them in there for you. If you have questions that you would like to send, you'd like me to look at, please send them to brendan@innerorbit.com. Where we would love to hear from you. And also if you have just general questions, please let us know. And super excited to chat with you. Thank you all so much for being here. If you have additional questions, go ahead and ask them now. Otherwise, super thankful for your time. And I will follow up with you with the recording. So in case you missed part of this, you can watch it later. But really, really grateful for all your time and hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day. And I'll just hang out for a minute just to make sure I've got questions answered on here. One more question. If others can edit, will the original still exist or be overwritten as the edits occur? So Keith, the goal is actually that, so if you have a population of students that needs things to be phrased in a specific way, and I mean, even if you're at a rural school and there's somebody in an urban school, and the example of a farmhouse is not relevant, but they can use an apartment complex instead. We actually want teachers to be able to see all of those different versions of the questions and be able to go through them. This doesn't exist right now, but it's one of the things that we're building in the future. It's a great question. So thank you. And Penelope, thank you so much. I'm really, really glad that you were on here. And Keith, again, if you have other questions, or Penelope, if you have other questions, please go ahead and let me know and I'll answer them now. Otherwise, have a beautiful rest of your day and go ahead and type other questions in, or I'll follow up via email to see if you have any questions. All right, awesome. I think we're going to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for hanging out, for asking questions. I'll send an email to you just to follow up. As long as you sign up for the webinar, you'll be able to view this recording later on. And I'll also send an email to you with my calendar link. So if you want to meet and you want to chat about this program, you can do that. You can also send it to your administrator or coordinators at the district level or any admin or teachers that you work with, department chairs, whatever, to have them take a look at this as well. And they can also follow up with me and make meetings with me, or just ask questions on that. Oh, thank you so much, Keith, for your comment about the fires. Yeah, we're okay for now. It's just a part of the ecosystem. As a science teacher, I feel like I know that we're in a chaparral ecosystem, and it needs fires to refresh itself. And there's all these adaptations that plants have come up with to deal with that. So sadly, humans have not adapted to that. Anyways, have a beautiful rest of your day, everyone. Take care. Really, really appreciate your thoughts and your questions and your time. Take care. Bye.